There are graves priests quietly avoid, graves that feel colder than the soil around them, graves that no candle warms, no prayer softens, as if something beneath them refuses the light. Tonight, you will learn why, and what happens to the souls buried in a place where heaven stays silent. Part 1. The grave that never warmed. Every cemetery carries a quiet sadness, but sometimes in the middle of all that silence, there is one grave that feels different, wrong, unsettling. Caretakers talk about it in whispers. Visitors step around it without knowing why. Even the wind seems to avoid that small corner of the earth. In summer, when every stone is warm under the sun, this one grave stays cold, as if the soil beneath is holding a winter that never ends. Families try everything. They plant flowers, but the flowers die faster here. They light candles, but the candles flicker out even with no wind. They lay fresh soil, but it always feels heavy, hard, untouched. Some describe standing beside such a grave and feeling a pressure in the chest, a strange sadness, a coldness that creeps up the spine. Not fear, but the sense that the soul beneath never found peace. Priests and elders say, a cold grave is not about temperature. It's about what the soul carried into eternity. These graves remind us of people who lived with hearts sealed shut. People who refused forgiveness, refused mercy, refused God until the very end. The earth remembers what the soul chose, and some choices echo in the soil long after the body is gone. Part 2. Why priests avoid certain graves. Priests don't announce this from the pulpit. They don't write it in parish newsletters, but privately, among themselves, in late-night conversations after funerals, they talk about graves they avoid, not out of superstition, not out of fear, but out of spiritual discernment, the same discernment used in exorcism, blessings, and spiritual direction. They describe approaching some graves and feeling something is off, blocked, resistant. A priest may begin a prayer over the grave, but the prayer feels like it hits something hard, like stone inside stone. Some graves feel closed to heaven, not because God rejects them, but because the soul rejected grace with its final breath. These graves belong to people who lived in deep mortal sin without repentance, cursed God on their deathbed, refused confession, even when begged, died with hatred they never let go, mocked the church, their whole life practiced evil and never renounced it. When a priest senses that deep spiritual resistance, he stops, not because he judges, but because he respects the boundary the soul itself created. Some priests have said, when the soil refuses prayer, I walk away. There are places where grace has difficulty entering, not because the church is powerless, but because the human will is terrifyingly strong, even in death. Part 3. Families who feel something is wrong. The chilling part. Families notice it too, and they notice it before anyone tells them anything. A daughter goes to her father's grave and says, "It feels lonely here, not peaceful, lonely." A son says, "When I stand here, it feels like someone is watching me. Someone who isn't happy I came." A widow lights a candle, and the flame goes out again and again, even though the air is still. Some describe sudden shivers, a heaviness in the chest, the sense of being unwelcome sadness that feels too heavy to be normal grief. The church teaches that souls do not haunt their graves, but many Catholic mystics say that the place of burial can reflect the spiritual condition of the person who lies there. It is not the soul itself acting. It is the memory of the soul's choices, the spiritual shadow left behind, the consequences of a life lived without repentance. These cold graves serve as silent warnings. Do not become like me. Do not wait until your last breath. Do not carry hatred into eternity. Part 4. The sins that follow you into the ground. There is a reason why some graves never feel peaceful, why the soil feels heavy, why priests step back, why families sense something wrong. Because some sins don't end when the heart stops beating. Catholic teaching says, unrepented sin becomes the final weight on the soul, a weight that settles like a shadow on the place of burial. These are not small failures or human weaknesses. These are sins that people protected until the end. They lied until their last breath. They never forgave the betrayal. They carried hatred like a shield. They hid secrets from everyone, even God. They refused confession when it mattered most. They closed their heart to mercy. And the coldness in their soul settled into the ground above them. Mystics describe certain graves as sealed, not by the church, but by the choices the person made throughout life. You feel that seal not with your eyes, but with your spirit. That is why some graves feel cold. They bear the weight of unfinished repentance, a life that ended before the soul ever opened its hands and said, Jesus, take this from me. The earth becomes a mirror, reflecting what the soul brought into eternity. Part 5. The grave the church will not bless. There is a rare moment in ministry, a moment priests never speak of openly, when they stand before a grave and know this prayer will not enter. Not because God refuses mercy, but because the soul refused mercy so violently, so deliberately, with such hardness that even the blessing feels like it slides off the soil. Priests describe this moment the same way. You step forward, and a wall stands there, invisible, silent, but solid. They begin, in the name of the Father, and something inside them says, stop. The church teaches God's mercy is infinite, but a human heart can shut itself so tightly that even mercy cannot enter unless the person chooses it. These unblessed graves usually belong to people who lived in deep hatred, cursed God at death, refused last rites, rejected the sacraments, their whole life practiced evil without remorse, died mocking faith. The church does not condemn them. No one knows their final second. But when a grave carries that resistance, priests step away quietly, whispering prayers of hope, but not forcing blessings. It is the most terrifying reminder of all. Hell is not a punishment given. It is a door chosen and locked from the inside. Part 6. The final warning to the living cold graves are not a horror story. They are a message carved not in stone, but in the silence around them. A message that says, do not wait. Do not gamble with your eternity. Do not carry secret sins to your deathbed. Do not let pride be the last thing you breathe. The dead cannot return to fix their choices, but the living still can. Every cold grave is a warning to the warm living. You have time. You have breath. You have the chance they no longer have. If you have someone to forgive, forgive now. If you have a sin to confess, confess now. If you have hatred inside you, release it now. If you have pride, break it now. Because the soil remembers, the soul remembers, heaven remembers, and one day, your grave will reflect the life you lived and the choices you carried into eternity. If this touched you, don't leave your heart heavy. Fix what you need to fix. Heal what you need to heal. Life is short. Eternity is not. Like, share, comment. I choose mercy, and subscribe for more deep reflections.